This is Chirag. He is an independent Microsoft 365 consultant and MVP. And as he just mentioned, he's based out of London, which is one of the benefits of having this event virtually. So take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to M365 Philly Virtual. I would have loved to be there in person, but the situation we're in is still not bad as compared to coming from London online. So once again, everyone, welcome to my session on designing and implementing Microsoft 365 Adoption Center. So first, I'd just like to say big thanks to the sponsors, the organizers, in particular, Jason, Tom, Manpreet, and Michael for making this happen. And obviously, it doesn't happen just like that. So do check those sponsors out, and obviously all the effort that you guys have put in. I really appreciate that to be here. So really excited to be part of this event. A bit about myself. I'm Chirag Patel. I live and work in London, UK. I'm an Office Apps and Services MVP. Generally, I work all things Microsoft 365 for last 20 years. Started off as SQL DBA, SharePoint administrator, and since then worked with various versions of on-prem SharePoint versions. And then obviously back in 2012, what became a Business Productivity Online Suite, BPOS. That was my first attempt at migrating SharePoint 2003 team sites into the BPOS SharePoint Online. So since then, it's just a fast pace of change of the Microsoft 365 tech and services that's come about. So SharePoint is still my bread and butter, but obviously Microsoft Teams for the last couple of years is obviously the bigger part of my work that I do. So I tend to work with various clients and in various sectors, and I'm not a developer. By profession, I'm an IT pro, so tend to be working with deployments, migrations, or simply just increasing the business value for the customers' investments they've already made in Microsoft 365. You have my contact details there. I don't generally blog that much, but I do post occasional updates. All my events that I speak at, I post all the updates about that. So any questions or any queries, feel free to connect with me or via Twitter or LinkedIn as well. In my spare time, when I then I tend to speak at various other events. These are some of the events that I've spoken at. And generally with any events I speak, I distribute those slides straight away. So even for this session, the slides will be made available through my blog, techchirag.com as well. But if you do check out other events, they're all community events. So there's plenty to learn and gather some tech from all the Microsoft 365 related topics. Okay, so what we're going to cover in this session, in this hour. So essentially, it's a real world scenario that I was part of a couple of organizations in terms of who rolled out Microsoft 365, pretty much everything, all the apps and services, not just SharePoint, but Microsoft Teams and everything else. And so, with that kind of solution put in place, there was no real resource for training. And pretty much limited resources as well in terms of how the solution was rolled out. It was all out of the box, so no development or any kind of customizations to that. And really, this session will inform you in terms of how we kind of went on this journey to bring all the users to the Microsoft 365, but generally making how the adoption center that was designed and implemented in order to kind of bring everybody together and stay abreast of the Microsoft 365 tech. And so, with that, obviously, as a team that consisted, it was just basically myself as Microsoft 365 consultant and very small IT department. So we'll kind of just go through quickly some of the background around that. But what we'll cover is just some of the whats and whys of why Microsoft 365, and kind of really focus on the heart of the content, because much of the content is available from Microsoft. They've put in a great effort into their adoption packs and the plans and the templates that you can download from their website. So that was use some of that to tailor it. But we'll go through that, and then we'll obviously go through a quick demo of the Adoption Center as a SharePoint site that's available to us as well. So in terms of the organization, so this was a renewable energy organization, two organizations I worked for, a very small organization, globally spread from the Americas to Australia, 2,500 users, very small team that we had. So we had a couple of change managers. We had one IT pro who was basically the document management controller, who was looking after a third-party system. And then obviously that individual was going to be taking over SharePoint within Microsoft 365 to manage all the documents within that. And so when we look at the context behind, what was the driver behind going through with Microsoft 365, pretty much projects was the main key content, if you like, because this is what keeps the company alive. In terms of the kind of projects they delivered, so the solar, the wind turbines, and all kinds of renewable energy projects. And so it was very important for this organization to stay competitive, as well as being able to work with the latest technologies, because obviously they acquired a lot of companies in the past, bringing all kinds of systems on board. And so as a result, they have a kind of if you like, the net of various systems. So Microsoft 365 was the way to kind of bring that systems together in terms of making sure everyone is on the same page. So when you look at some of the drivers in there, so yeah, there are small to medium-sized organization, collaboration, which we hear all the time, that in terms of has to be transparent, and being able to work with various geographies and different cultures. So as a result, they, that was kind of the key for them, so that they can actually at least exchange the skills and the expertise between various countries and the projects that they've delivered in order to kind of bring that change very easily, but also being able to increase the efficiency and productivity. But when you look at these kind of drivers, it doesn't really quantify in terms of what is that target, what is that success metric, in order to make sure that what we've delivered as Microsoft 365 platform, that we've achieved that success. And so these are very qualitative drivers that we had, no real success matrix behind it, other than to say if everybody uses Microsoft 365, then that's kind of good for us. Depending on how you look at it, there's two views to that. Yes, for sure, number of active connections to the platform is one way to indicate that they're using it, but whether they're using it appropriately, it's a different story altogether. So we'll share that a bit later on in the session in terms of some of the key metrics that we kind of set out to make sure that they're deemed as a success criteria. And then the last one was more about reducing some of the third-party tools in order to kind of drive some of those services as well, and just kind of really making sure that people are not using, say, WhatsApp or some other third-party conferencing tools, and being able to just conduct their business and exchange information on a secure Microsoft 365 platform. Excuse me. So in terms of, just for those of you who may not be fully familiar with Microsoft 365, because generally, when we deliver Office 365 collaboration and document management type services, we tend to focus mainly within the Office 365 piece of that Microsoft 365 ecosystem. But generally, there are three components. You have your desktop, or now they're called Microsoft 365 apps, which is your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on. But also you've got your online services all combined together as forming as part of your Microsoft 365, which is now it's called back in the few months ago, it was like Office 365. And then you got your Windows 10, and then also you got your general capability around the mobile solutions, as well as the security and compliance added to that all-round solution as Microsoft 365. But when you sell this to the users, there's nothing in it for a user, because all they will see that, it's just a Word, Excel that I'm getting. Maybe it's a new version. Yes, I'm getting SharePoint, I'm getting OneDrive, storing files. For a user, that's not really kind of what they were after, but it was more of a forced change from an IT that's the platform we're going to go for. So from an adoption perspective, it's a different story to design in order to make them buy in to the Microsoft 365 adoption services. So again, why Microsoft 365? So this is kind of the services that I tend to design when I work with various organizations, to kind of spell it out in terms of what is it that they're going to get. So when you look at the top row there, essentially these are your, if you like, the capabilities. So for these organizations, they wanted to roll out the new intranet, new collaboration capability around SharePoint, as well as Microsoft Teams. And so rather than selling the actual tech itself, it was more geared towards that, you're going to get your document management, which is going to consist of your contracts, your agreements, your projects. As an example, if you're going to collaborate both internally and externally, then the way you're going to go about doing that is through the means of those technologies. So then introduce the technology gradually as to what SharePoint exactly is, what Microsoft Teams can do, what is that kind of overlap that happens between Microsoft Teams and SharePoint. If you store files through your Microsoft Teams, where do they go? Do they go in SharePoint? Or if you have your group chats, for example, then those files reside in OneDrive. So all that kind of gets spelled out through the services kind of architecture, if you like, through this Microsoft 365. So this was really kind of, if you like, grained in to say that this is why we're rolling out Microsoft 365 for every user in the organization in order to make success of the solution. Now, obviously, business applications itself, right at the end, that's going through a lot of change. Today at Microsoft Inspire, they announced that you're going to have introducing the Microsoft Data Flex, which is going to be something that will be able to create an application inside Microsoft Teams, which is another name for the CDS. So as a change, this goes through constant change, and it's one of the adoption criteria as well, to be able to keep up with that change and also pass the change on to the users. So again, that eternal question, what's in it for me? So yes, IT can design the projects, they design the plan and everything else. Yes, we kind of inform the users what's coming their way, but different users will see things in a different way, and also the language that they understand. So, when you look at the change manager, for example, who are the main change agents, if you like, to drive the project. But in this organization, what I found is that the change manager, whilst they were ProSci certified, but they didn't really know how to use SharePoint or OneDrive, or even didn't really have the experience of that as well. And so when you think about it overall, when there's the timeline of, say, around 6 months to try and deliver the entire solution, and then you have the situation where the change manager has to be trained, not just the users, then that becomes a bigger mountain to climb, as well as the technical users in the IT who had never even used any parts of Microsoft 365. So in terms of how this gets rolled out, which was done through various phases. So phase one was all about understanding the real business context. What's the assessment, what's the main content that drives the organization, in order to understand some of those business scenarios. So they were clearly listed down line by line, so that everyone knew exactly what this organization stands for. And then the second phase was commenced with the rollout of the intranet using SharePoint online. And there's a number of ways you can do that. There is obviously a good guide lookbook from Microsoft for inspiration purposes in terms of how you can design your intranet sites. So this session is obviously not going to go in that detail of how to design the intranet, but nevertheless, that was the main part of the phase 2, together with the collaboration as well. So being able to separate those SharePoint team sites, which were obviously integrated with Microsoft Teams as well. And then obviously phase 2, that took obviously about 4 to 5 months. And phase 3 was then kind of commenced with again using SharePoint, but for the main enterprise content management, so which was mainly the projects for the organization with the workflows and everything in place. And then last but not least was the phase 4, which was basically the introduction of Power Platform and some of the key business applications to do that. So that was kind of the overall picture around phase 1 to phase 4 in terms of what Microsoft 365 is exactly going to consist of. So overall, in terms of the timeline, this was a kind of a 2-year timeline from phase 1 to phase 4. And then obviously there were some delays in between the phases because of the business process or the delays around getting the information in a timely manner. But in all correspondence, if you like, the communication was the key to understand exactly for every single user one site to go to understand where we are within this journey of Microsoft 365. And so from a manager's perspective, if you like, to kind of not just from a champion's perspective, which is what we're going to cover briefly a bit later on, but from a manager's point of view, it was important to understand what is it going to work for them in their department or their business unit, the Microsoft 365 aspects, so that they're able to advise other managers as well. So these were, like, if you like, our 5 key type of persona, if you like, to kind of drive our Microsoft 365 program. Then the next step around this was the actual champions network itself. Now, champions, if you like, whether you call them champions or whether you call them buddies, doesn't really matter. But these are the business users, and this is in a way very constrained for them, because not only they're part of their own organizations delivering the results of the work that they do, this is something that's on top of, in addition to their duties that they do. So in total, for over 10 countries with 2,500 users, we had about 20 business champions. So the change managers, if you like, were responsible for assembling that team of champions, as well as training them on the actual what the project is all about, their involvement and their responsibilities as well, in order to kind of drive the communications as well as the feedback that was requested from the business in order to kind of bring all that together. So in all, basically being able to kind of promote the change in the positive way, but also feeling them loved in the sense that training them on Microsoft 365 through procuring an organization to train them on various apps and services for Microsoft 365, because otherwise there is no real incentive for these champions. So that kind of really worked for us. It is an extra cost. I think champions should be trained, not something that they should be left alone or kind of read up on something on the web or watch videos. It's a formal training for all the champions to be in place. And so this was across 3 territories, if you like: Australia, US, and the Europe itself. So 3 separate training that was conducted for these champions. And then obviously, in order to kind of bring that change across, part of the adoption was that being able to share and tell, if you like, their showcases of items around the projects, as well as some of the FAQs, some of the questions that we would get to build in part of our adoption center itself, so that before they go live, we have enough information from all the champions and not just from all the users by that means. And then obviously, as we know that with Microsoft 365, when it goes through a lot of change, we get sometimes, if you're in a targeted release, part of the release, you get kind of the early previews for some of the change that might come. So obviously the champions were put into that pretty much straight away so that they're abreast of the change, but as well as being able to understand that unlike your finance or HR system, this is one system that's very much organic, and with Microsoft 365 change that goes along all the time is something that they need to be aware of, that this is not something that we put in today and then there's no change at all. So it's here and it's going to change constantly, but for the improvements for all the tech that they have. So that was kind of, if you like, how the Champions Network was established, and then being able to kind of just being around them pretty much all the time, both virtually through the conference calls, as well as physically, which is where I was based in the UK, to kind of drive that Champions Network all the time. In terms of the scenarios, so again, champions are not really tech savvy, although that's one of the qualities we look for, that they have to be tech savvy, but a lot of these champions are business users. So to translate that into something that's more meaningful to them. So these were kind of, if you like, some of the scenario examples that we have. So for example, a lot of Excel files were getting emailed with all the data and everything else, and then conduct meetings with various versions. And there's, if you look at it from this perspective here, the first scenario is we would advise that if you look at that from Microsoft Teams perspective, then yes, you can upload your Excel file, share it to amongst your team, then post your agenda for that particular meeting through the chat window for that calendar meeting that you've sent invites, and then being able to kind of quantify the benefits that reduces, not just the emails, but also the number of files that's kind of going around, if you like. So this kind of made obviously more meaningful for the users and the champions, but also kind of listing various scenarios. And this is just kind of a one example of that. And we had about many scenarios to kind of depict in terms of what to use when for which particular scenario for which tech. So kind of laid it out in this manner, and then being able to work out that how do you measure the success around these particular scenarios. And obviously these scenarios will change, all new scenarios would come, and then we would simply make a list of all the scenarios on our adoption center itself, which is the Modern SharePoint site, and then we would make them available so that everyone's kind of visible to those scenarios, that how you use this technology. So communication plans and activities, if you like. This was kind of, if you like, in a various ways this was carried out. Now with this one, we designed our own templates for particular in terms of the launch for the program, for Skype for Teams upgrade notice, because we were using Skype for Business. Now Microsoft makes this available, and that's fine. We can, we could have downloaded that, we could have tailored it, and then just make those templates available. And that kind of really accelerates the process in terms of some of those activities that you can carry out. But we kind of went one step further with that. So not only making the use of those templates, and then being able to kind of go with this specialist knowledge-based session. So once the countdown, once the system was gone live, then following that, we had kind of a 6 weeks of period to kind of carry out on a weekly basis, every 3 weeks, if you like, to kind of conduct a week-long activity of knowledge-based event sessions. And so if you look at it from a typical week, what that consisted of was a story from a business unit in terms of how they're using a particular set of apps or services for their business, like projects, for example, and they would actually demo that solution as well. So it would be like a town hall type meeting, if you like. And we would do this, we would record these sessions, but this would happen 3 times in that week. And then we would obviously write up a complimentary article supporting that customer story, and then be able to post that around on the intranet, as well as some of the email campaigns we had, and just basically, all the kind of good stuff that goes around advertising the event. And that kind of really helped to promote not only just for that particular scenario for the customer story, but we had about 6 of those spread over that timeline once every 2 to 3 weeks and a week long. And then we would wrap that up by kind of a 4-hour, if you like, window for anybody to actually tap in and ask us any questions for that particular technology that they were used. So this kind of really helped us tremendously in order to kind of adopt the solution. And then obviously we had lunch and learn sessions as well. And that was really kind of a tech based really. So whether you know how to use OneDrive, the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint, or within Microsoft Teams where your files get stored, as well as how to work with the apps and the connectors in the Teams as well. So one of the, in terms of when you look at it from a design perspective, if you look at the overall adoption for Microsoft 365, and yes, Microsoft Teams have got their own, if you like, set of templates and ways of how to kind of go about adopting the solution, going through those various phases and everything else. So the way we kind of done this was that we used the Microsoft 365 Learning Pathway solution. We obviously then tailored that solution to our needs. But prior to that, and when this came about, we were doing things manually. So pretty much, we'll look at this in a minute. But when we look at it, we had to collect our own, if you like, application information sheets, if you like. What is OneDrive, what is SharePoint, kind of a one-pager, if you like. So we had to design all that. But when this came along, then we obviously kind of jumped onto the Learning Pathway solution, which is basically a SharePoint website. It's developed by through the open source PNP team. So it's if you like, all the Microsoft training content that rolls from Microsoft into your own SharePoint site onto your tenant. And then you can customize that SharePoint site in terms of the colors, and you can add your own content to it as well. So this kind of really took a big hold for us in order to kind of drive that site forward for us. What we then did is that we kind of went one step further in terms of not just basically building all the getting out of the box content that we have within that site, but what we did is that we actually fed in more information around the success stories, and that kind of lived both on Yammer as well as a dedicated article on the intranet as well. And then obviously for some folks, it was a very, if you like, kind of an unusual way to connect, because we were using some third-party single sign-on authentication. So therefore, we had to fit in those instructions around how to log in through mobile app versus also on the desktops as well. So, or if they're working on the cafe or something like that. So kind of really designing all those things. And then as well as that, the example scenarios for projects, as well as the contracts and general business scenarios that goes with that. So everything was fed into that, including some of the governance areas as well. So if somebody is a SharePoint site owner, then what does that mean? What are their roles and responsibilities, and how to manage that? So all this information that you see on this slide was all fed into this SharePoint site. So it was a win-win for us on that front. So let's just take a look at that site. So if I go to okay, so this was what I was mentioning earlier on, that if you go into the Microsoft site, lookbook.microsoft.com, then here you have several kind of ways to kind of just to see, get the source of inspiration, if you like, in terms of the organization level here. So if you look at from here, I've got solutions here. So this is pretty much we got the learning pathway solution, and if you just go in and click on that, then obviously it tells you exactly what you're going to get, something that you're going to put in your own tenant. So clearly says it's an on-demand custom training from Microsoft. So when they keep up to date with all the content of Microsoft products and services, you don't have to worry about that, because all that comes through to your SharePoint site, and it's also customizable and being able to build your own playlists as well. And then you've got a few things in there as well around the web parts they use, news, events, and so on. But if I go back to the other page, so in there you've also got this was something that this has come about quite new, Microsoft 365 freelance communication site. But you've also got things like in the kind of helping the teams and departments in order to kind of get them to have a look, what a typical team communication site might look like, what you would get, and you've got different supports and everything else labeled there. So here's the market project team. So when it came to kind of selling it, given that we were the limited resource for this project, then this kind of really helped us to kind of show them that this is the kind of the art of possible, what you can get with the solutions we have through the business scenarios. So take a look at that. And then, so if I go over to our learning pathway site, so here, this is my test tenant, Contoso Electronics. So here, this is the SharePoint site. So that's the solution that I kind of installed on this tenant here. So what you get, all this is designed for us, nothing that we have to do in the beginning with. So if I go in here, start with 6 simple steps, then you get all this content that's loaded for you. So with all the built-in menu structures within that. So you can see here, for example, welcome to Microsoft 365, what you can do, which is create and save documents, work with your team, and then list by list instructions within that, and the little video that goes. So all that is Microsoft related content. We obviously went that step further and added our own content to this site as well. So if I go back to homepage, and if I go into Microsoft 365 training, and that again, we didn't really call Microsoft 365 as such. We had a different solution name for that, so everything was branded and by that solution. And so with that, we obviously went into these areas to customize this area for our users. So if I go into here, we got 3 sections here: get started, scenarios, as well as products. Yeah.
Sorry, you are sharing your slide. See your slide.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Apologies. Give me a second. How about now?
I'm still currently seeing your slides.
Okay, let me apologize. Let me stop sharing and reshare. Okay, so okay, how about now?
I'm seeing the site now. Yep.
Great, excellent, thanks. Let me go back because I think I've kind of missed quite a bit there. So if I go back, I was talking about SharePoint lookbook. So this is the site I was talking about, that you can get your inspiration for all your sites and everything else. So here you got your 5 tabs. You got your organization, department, and different templates type of sites you get. So you can kind of look to use this to kind of drive the adoption forward. But what we used was the solutions aspect of that, which was the Microsoft 365 learning pathway. So this is something you get from the team who's developed all these templates with support from Microsoft around that. So you get that template which is ready made for you. So if I go back to my organization's tenant, Contoso Electronics, then as part of that solution, what you get is a SharePoint site with these menus in place, this hero web part that you get with the SharePoint site that's designed for you, as well as other aspects of that. So if I go into here, start with 6 simple steps, then from a user's perspective, with again, if you wanted to change these terminologies, if you wanted to change the language, then this particular content packs you get, you can't do them, but you can design your own if you wanted to kind of roll out other content within this site. But here you just get within one page all the options that you would need for what you might want your users to go through. And this exact content that you see here lives on Microsoft and docs.microsoft.com website. So you don't have to really kind of worry on the change from that front. So if I go into my go back to homepage and go to Microsoft 365 training page. So here this is kind of laid out already for me. So I've got a couple of categories for get started, some scenarios, as well as the individual products in there as well. So in our case, when we were rolling it out, we kind of switched off some of the functionality for the users because we just didn't really roll that out yet. So in particular, if you like, Teams came a bit later on after when we rolled out intranet. So that's quite kind of, if you like, easy for in this particular site to kind of go about to switch those things off. So if I click here, settings icon, all within that page, then you can actually control as a business user, whoever's driving this this change around the adoption aspects of it. So this gives me a skeletal structure around how this whole SharePoint site is architected together. So I've got my first days recommended and basics category here. So if I wanted to kind of, you can see I can only delete this particular one because that's something I created. But if I don't want users to show a particular updates in here, for example, what's new in April 2019, I might want to switch that off for some reason. So I can just click on that eye icon and that will hide away from the user's view so they don't get access to that help text there. I can go into add more categories, so something that I can reuse the existing category. So if I go into add a new category, and let's say we call this projects and project management. So I've created my category as that and save that. And then I can go and add my playlists to that. So I can just click on the plus icon there. So I can upload my image if I wanted to here, and I'll give this a name here. So we'll call this Modern Projects. And that's going to be my playlist title there. Give a description. Keep it the same for now. Technology, I can choose a particular technology that I want to select if I want to choose particular content from those things, but I know I want to use quite a few, so I'm going to leave that blank. And I'm going to just choose project management as a category here, which is something I created. And then I can go into my scenarios and I can either pick modern workplace to add into that. But I can also go and say add Microsoft Teams to it as well. And then I can go down further here and I can add some of the items in there. So if I search for SharePoint and not all the help pages I want to display for SharePoint within there, but I can say that I want to choose a particular item in there, create a page, for example. And then I want to choose add selected assets. So I should have done that. Yeah, that's added there. I can then go into Microsoft Teams. In fact, let's do Planner. So Planner, I'll go 5 help text there, and I can go and check on create a plan. And I'll probably just go as far as that. So at this point, I've got my category, which is what I call project management. Within that category, I'll have my playlist called Modern Projects, and then within that projects modern projects playlist, I've got these 2 particular items in there. So when I go to my help page, then at least that's going to be available for my users for how to go about doing modern projects, if you like. So for now, that's added in there, and I'll just close that playlist. And I'll go back to my home page and go to Microsoft 365 training. And let's refresh the page. It's always the case when you demo this. I'll do that one more time. Okay, not sure what happened there. Okay, apologies for that. If I go to the basics one, which is what I created earlier, so if I go into basics, go into my basics and then starters playlist that I had, then within there I've got my two assets in there: create a plan, create a page. But this way I can build my playlist and my assets all within here to make that happen. So that's in principle how the adoption side for our training for Microsoft 365 worked. And then obviously when you if you just go back to my slides, so we then obviously extended that further by adding other content within the actual SharePoint site itself. So things like the design planning guide. If a site owner is using a site, how many web parts should they put on a page? Some of those web parts are very resource hungry, as well as some of the usage guides around the Microsoft 365. So we made that website, SharePoint site, rich through the use of our own content as well as Microsoft's provided content. And then obviously the other aspects of that is that you have something that's available in our Microsoft 365 tenant, the Office What's New management, because constantly with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, we get all these little features constantly updated. Again, your organization may have different release cycle on how they roll out Word or Excel. But if you look at this particular areas of that, you have your if you like, the monthly update channels, if you like, and you can actually control as an administrator, if you like, what to show and hide the actual help that your users see. So if I go back to my demo here, if I go into Microsoft 365 Admin Center, which I can access through the admin app and then the org settings. So within that, there is a services tab. And if I scroll down, then I've got something here called Office What's New Management. So here I can get to the page, which will basically list me the release for the Office Microsoft 365 apps. So in this particular one, 2020 July release, there's a feature about make a PDF connection, which applies to the Excel program. It's shown by default, but I may not want to show that to the users because it might be just irrelevant. So if I select that feature, then I can simply just show or hide. So in this case, I'll just hide that feature. And if I do that, it just gives me a little link here to learn more about that particular feature, what it is. It applies to Excel, and I'll just click on there, hide from users. So that way, when the users open up the Excel program, then this will not light up in their what's new area of the Excel program. So you can control this in terms of what gets to be visible or what you can hide for the users. So then in order to going forward with that, so obviously you have Microsoft 365's way of managing and those changes that you get. So yes, the roadmap is there. So that's something for the IT to bring them to speed as to what's coming their way, because even during the project, you have obviously all the changes that were happening. So roadmap is the key area to look at, but also the Microsoft 365 Message Center as well. So all the apps and services that you get, that's overwhelming, but that's something that is part of what we do. So better get used to it, and then build that into the planner plans. So in order to understand what changes may impact as well. So that's more important to understand how the Microsoft 365 is going to move forward. But for the vast majority of the users, they will be on the standard release there as well. So that's something to bear in mind with the adoption pieces there. And then, of course, once the users see what they like, they have some more ideas, which is great. So you kind of catalog those ideas or requests. And then typically, if you like, if you're a small IT in a small organization, you don't have a process of managing those demands or requests, then this is kind of a simple process to kind of make them understand that, what you ask for, you may not necessarily get straight away, but there's a process to follow. So in this case, a business requirement or simple request that comes in gets reviewed not just by IT, but the change managers as well as the senior, depending on the size of the change and the requirement. In some cases, obviously, you may need a budget for it if it's a large piece of functionality. If you don't have architects or anybody to review architecturally how that's going to affect, then obviously you need to still consider as to how that's going to affect your other systems at a physical layer. And then obviously, depending on what solution you go for, you review those options and then decide whether you're going to switch that on within Microsoft 365, such as, say, for example, shifts in Microsoft Teams, or even maybe some third-party app connectors that you may want to make it available in Teams. Whatever it is, go through this process so at least the users are still part of that journey in terms of what's going to come their way. And from an IT perspective, you have a situation where basically they're always left to the last. In this organization, they left them to the last to get them trained on SharePoint as well as Microsoft Teams. In my view, I think that should happen right from the start when the projects begin, so that they know exactly along the journey how and things that will be more familiarized to them. So this is a kind of, if you like, a learning path for becoming Microsoft 365 administrator, and depending on where you kind of reside within the IT, whether you're kind of messaging or security, or you may have MCSC productivity. But there's 2 exams, and then along the way you have all the resources from Microsoft as well as from the third-party plural site systems as well. So kind of important to get for the IT on board to begin with. Otherwise, there'll always be a kind of a catch-up on that from that. So it's not just about users, but also the technical personnel. So in terms of the kind of the targets, if you like, how we kind of measure this, if you like, number of logins is very basic. In some organizations, they don't even consider that as a success metric. But given that this organization came from, with having so many systems and being able to kind of understand how this Microsoft 365 works, they really just wanted to understand who's logging on to SharePoint or OneDrive, sharing the files and all those kind of useful data that you get. But also Delve was kind of a key part to it as well, because one of the main driver was that being able to exchange skills and experiences from different colleagues around the different territories. So the only way you can measure that to try and quantify that is making sure that everyone's filled out their profiles and not just their photos or anything else. So we had about 5 attributes in there in terms of their skills, the projects that they've worked with, and other attributes in there. And then obviously, from a training perspective, the knowledge events that we were carrying out, who showed up, the tendencies for that, the videos that we uploaded onto stream, how many views we got that for those events that we recorded, as well as for the drop-in visits. So all this kind of data was gathered to kind of understand, and then obviously make sure that was kind of targeted around that. And then obviously you got your Microsoft 365 reports, as well as the Power BI adoption pack that you get from Microsoft. So all that combined kind of gives us, if you like, the picture of the successes for that. Needless to say, for us, it was a success, because the fact that not only the projects were getting done because they had to, but it was more from the requests that they were getting for it as well, to kind of build in other requests for features or improvements and everything else. So that was kind of if you like, our the key target matrix within that. So that's kind of, if you like, very rapid tour, if you like, in terms of how to kind of design, implement the adoption center. Much of it was within that SharePoint site, but there's a lot more work that goes outside of that in order to get to where we wanted to get to with that particular SharePoint site. So with that, I think would just like to say big thanks to all of you and for having me. So please, good, bad, whatever it is, please make sure you fill those feedback out. And yeah, if any questions or any queries, I'll just kind of have a look on the Q&A panel. But just like to say thanks for being here, and thanks for having me.
Great, thank you, Suraj. We will give it a few seconds here to see if some questions are coming in.
Sure. There must be a question, I'm sure. Somebody's got to ask a question. Don't be shy.
It's something about live events.
It is, I know it is, isn't it? By the way, you can still post questions as anonymous, so I will not know who you are, so don't worry. And there is no such thing as easy question.
Wait, I think one's coming.
That's right. Typing. You got plenty of time.
There you go. How long was the whole process?
Okay. Right. If we talk about the actual the journey from Microsoft 365 start to finish, 2 years. And if we look at from a change management perspective, I myself, as the Microsoft 365 consultant, I was there for a year. And that year, it was all about training everybody from an IT perspective, that what they're getting into, but also driving some of the champions in terms of those knowledge-based events as well. So pretty much long time with a small team that we had. So it really kind of favors around what exactly you want to roll out. So projects for us was the key. Projects alone took around a year because these were large construction projects and so forth. So yeah, long process, but in some organizations they do it in 3 months, like Microsoft Teams, as Microsoft sort of advises with their adoption pack. But again, every organization differs depending on in which country you're in and the territories, how many countries you're in and everything else. Any more questions?
Yeah, there's another one here. How often do you have to go in and make changes to the adoption center?
Oh, okay. Not a great deal, to be honest. The only change we had to make on that one was the actual knowledge-based events. So because every 3 weeks we would have a new event. So the only change we would have to make was creating a new event page, which is quite easy to do in SharePoint. And then obviously being able to send out those invites and then also creating those playlists that I was demoing earlier to then post particular articles within that. So very little change. A lot of it was from Microsoft anyways, so that change was happening behind the scenes anyways. Homepage needed a change because homepage is something that you want to keep it more dynamic. So for example, for new starters, because again, that was one of the things that people come and go quite a lot in this organization. So the first 6 steps that we talked about, that was always there. But for Teams and SharePoint, that changed over the period of time because for everything else, we would point them to the Microsoft Stream for the introductions and everything else. And still being able to access those videos from the SharePoint site anyways.
The next question is, how many people were on your team?
So we had we had two change managers, which was covering all 10 countries, if you like. Two change managers, one Microsoft 365 consultant myself, and one IT pro who was looking after another system altogether. And he was essentially like 50-50 for Microsoft 365 and also the other third-party document system, one project manager, so about 6 altogether, and one senior stakeholder.
Okay. Next question, does Learning Pathways have a training resource for Power Apps or Flow?
I haven't seen that, no. I think when I talk to the folks in the community, I know with Power Platform in general, which comprises not only Power Apps and Power Automate and Flow, but Power BI as well. And so they tend to have, it's almost like a different camp in terms of their training and resources and everything else. With this particular solution, I believe, actually I say that, this is the one you can catch me out on. I'm pretty sure, if I go to Microsoft 365, and this gets improvised quite a lot of the time. So no, there isn't. That's okay. Yeah, no, there isn't. So it may come. I'm not sure if it will or not, but I know they're definitely on a different resource side. So, but what you can do is you can build yourself your own libraries, if you like, which is the hardware that I used to do before Microsoft Learning Pathway came along, was simply collecting the links, if you like, from Power Apps and Power Automate, just the basic. So you can do it that way and feed that information inside your Learning Pathway site.
Okay. Any more questions from anyone? Going once, going twice. All right, so this concludes the sessions for the day. We're going to continue back tomorrow. We will have Heather Newman as our keynote speaker tomorrow morning. Heather will be live, so we shouldn't have any audio issues tomorrow. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for participating. I hope everyone took something away. I saw a few comments here and there, people just saying their thanks because it applied directly to what they were working on. I've seen some of the evaluation forms already, and same thing I've been seeing over there for some of the other speakers as well. So we're hoping to continue providing some really good content. This is a different event than what we're used to doing, but so far so good. So
that's great. No, I think I've attended a few sessions, so it's been brilliant. I think it's great work, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We will catch you back here tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern.